This video marks the 30th video, as well as 300 subscribers to the Unusual Due Diligence community. We are making waves, my friends. Now, I mentioned in a prior video on the Metaverse that Nike, which is well connected to many sports, including professional basketball, about Nike going all in on the Metaverse ideas. Let's pin that thought for a moment, and now consider the website for Take-Two Interactive, which has a basketball game on their main website here, as I put up on the screen. The actual title of which is NBA 2K22. So, NBA basketball shows up once again. It's not just that they're publishing a basketball game, but that the CEO has comments about the Metaverse that we're going to get into. Wait, Metaverse and basketball? And Nike and Metaverse? And Metaverse and cryptocurrencies? Oh my friends, the Metaverse has some unusual connections. Welcome to Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host Poseidon, God of the Sea. In today's fresh episode, let's swim together through a brilliant coral reef to frame the Metaverse. Are you curious how Take-Two and NBA basketball have shown up again? Let's dive in and get started. Here's how. Let's start with the 300 of you that have gathered today. This community, like the glistening growth of an underwater city, continues to expand and has grown to 300 members strong. And I have to say, you all are fantastic, as we to retain a safe place for growing and learning new ideas and challenging theories that impact your bottom line, financial or otherwise. We have to remember that underneath all the technology and business, the fundamental story here, it's about people like you. And this community has some rather interesting members. If you caught my most recent video on a spotlight of entering the Metaverse by way of digital twins, you may have thought that a strange entry point to combine our favorite cryptocurrency projects with this idea of a metaverse, omniverse, multiverse, or whatever verse we want to call it. But you want to know something that just made me swell. It involves economics, or rather, the famous magazine, The Economist. You see, The Economist covered the recent story on the Metaverse that first featured here on Unusual Due Diligence, and from the same perspective. I'm sure it was just fortunate timing, but the connection is too good to not gloat on for a moment. The day after publishing on Unusual Due Diligence, the video titled Trillions Hidden in Digital Twins in a Metaverse, Connecting ANKR, AMP, Shiba Inu, Clove, and more. Well, The Economist publishes a similar story with nearly the same title. Well, the words were completely different, but the sense is the same. Their take? Let me quote you this passage from their current article. Quote, "One new virtual world deserves real attention. The enterprise metaverse. Forget rock stars and fancy frocks. This is essentially a digital carbon copy of the physical economy, building living, interactive blueprints that replicate the physical world might, in time, come to shape it. The vision of what this might mean has become clearer in recent days. Microsoft, the world's largest software firm, earlier this month put at its center of its annual customer shindig, as did NVIDIA, a big maker of graphics processors, on November 9th, end quote. So not only did The Economist concurrently pick up on what I discussed about NVIDIA, but also Microsoft, and just as importantly, the entire concept of digital twins. Dear viewer, I've never felt more validated than having a mainstream write-up on these same trend lines. In the description of this video is the link to The Economist story. Now, I mentioned 300 subscribers to this channel, and that's brilliant. And stay with me here if you're not a subscriber, because this will feed into the multiverse conversation. And here's what I mean. Let me tell you what I have in mind for the future real fast, and I'm going to thread this idea of the metaverse into that. I'm a big believer in having stretch goals. Goals that help push you to redefine your own expectation and experience of life. Just as an example, when I started YouTube, and for those who were here in the beginning, you know how true this was, I was very, very new. However, I've kept at it, and really it was the kind words of the early community rock stars that helped encourage me to keep going. If you notice in my videos, the production quality is slowly improving. Each video, I set a goal. See, I'm learning with each passing video. The sets are becoming a bit more complex, and I've started getting a feel for how to do puppets and transitions. And if you caught a recent video featuring the Autobot Wheeljack, you'll have even noticed I figured out my first complex animation, bringing a physical thing into the virtual. The same sort of idea as the metaverse. Interesting, no? And this channel is just getting started. You see, I was up late researching in the wild on the internet while I considered this idea I mentioned in passing in the video introducing the metaverse. What if Unusual Due Diligence had some sort of metaverse, omniverse, multiverse presence? What would that be? How would that work? And more importantly, why? These are the same questions every entrepreneurial-minded mindset person who sees a $1 trillion market is just starting? That's what's going through their head. These are the questions they are asking. I firmly believe cryptocurrencies are just starting as well. That story, all of these stories, it's a story of beginnings. So the next thing I had to ask is, well, what exactly is the metaverse? How can I deliver the most value to the members of this community above and beyond the channel, but also how can I set a stretch goal to really push the boundaries of what I believe is possible? That means we need to swim deeper into the metaverse to better understand it. And this time, we're taking an assistant guide with us today. That guide, Kyle Orland of Arstechnica. The article will be in the description below. Now, Kyle asked the same question I do, which is whether the multiverse is essentially Second Life 2.0. Before we talk about the specific categories in the multiverse, he ends the article with this comment from the game company Take-Two. Quote, as Take-Two's Zelnick put it, if you define metaverse as everything we do in the world physically will become digital, then you're talking to a skeptic. And that goes with my point from my earlier video. A pizza is great, but when I'm hungry, I want the real pizza and not a virtual one. Now, I can certainly order a virtual pizza, and I can fiddle with having an augmented reality pizza in my kitchen. Maybe I can assemble one inside the kitchen and figure out exactly how I want it to look and click a virtual button. But when it's time to eat, it's got to be the real deal. Now, let me take a quick tangent here and just note something interesting. Something I need to thread out more, but I want to just take a moment to talk about this. Now, I mentioned this in a prior video on the metaverse that Nike, which is well connected to basketball, about them going all in on the metaverse ideas. And you know what's interesting about specifically getting a quote from Take-Two? Now, on their main website here, as I have on the screen, is NBA 2K22. NBA basketball shows up again. Now, if you're not sure why I find that interesting, check out the channel playlist on unusual basketball theories that connect the dots on a lot of very interesting ideas. Okay, let's set that question aside and return to the content of this video about the metaverse. What I like about how Kyle organized the article are the guideposts to think about the multiverse. So we're going to just pull those out now. Here's a list, and as I read these off, let me tint the lens a bit. This channel has covered artificial intelligence in healthcare, so this is what we see in Clover Health Systems, but also very specific cryptocurrency projects. Consider the use case of democratizing access to blockchain technologies such as with ANKR, secure crypto transactions by way of AMP, and even smart contract chains through Algorand. Now, here's the list of metaverse components. Think of it like building blocks, but let's see if you note a common theme across all 7 of these. First, a shared social space with avatars to represent users. Second, a persistent world for the avatars to inhabit and interact with. Third, the ability to own virtual property as you would physical property. Fourth, the ability to create your own virtual property. Fifth, the ability to exchange and or sell your virtual property. Sixth, a shared universe of IP from multiple companies. Seventh, full 3D telepresence via VR or AR glasses. Now, did you pick up on the theme of property ownership? I recognize each topic is well worth exploring on its own. My current thinking is that in future videos, I need to dive into each one of these topics and really expand on them. Today's episode is a bit reflective. When you're evaluating crypto investments, it may be worthwhile activity to ask, how do these investments translate to a future state? But Poseidon, you might ask, isn't this just all hype? Well, certainly appears to be so. However, I'd encourage you to check out my first video on the metaverse to understand why I am even covering the metaverse topic on this channel. I had no real intention of doing so, but then you might say something unusual happened. So as we close up here today, Kyle notes 2 central ideas that he frames in the context of this conversation around the multiverse. First, he asks, whose multiverse is it anyway? And if you look at the technology, the tension of decentralization, such as what Tyler Spalding from AMP discusses, or the push to democratize access that ANKR is working on, or their DeFi movement, which I definitely need to cover that in relation to the metaverse, there's a good question here, but also the secret that unlocks why the metaverse is beyond a $1 trillion opportunity. It's because in the metaverse, we unlock the potential of all that is or could be. Let me explain it this way. For most of human history, when you look at all the events and conflicts and wars, there's a notion of ideas. My tribe's ideas versus your tribe's ideas. When we look at that list that Kyle assembles, what do you see? It's a list of who owns what ideas. What does ownership as a concept even mean? NFTs are exploring that in contemporary terms, but I'd argue so is Shiba Inu. So let's pick that up again down the road. The last question Kyle asks is this, which is equally valid. What problem are you solving? Now I'd go so far as to reframe this question slightly as, what problems are you solving with your definition of the metaverse? Now, Kyle expands his point with Roblox. His comment in the article here is a great example of my prior point. Quote, Clive Thompson argues persuasively that Minecraft is already a metaverse in every way that matters. Epic's Tim Sweeney sees Fortnite as the central pillar of the company's own metaverse. The billion-dollar, actually multi-billion-dollar Roblox lets users create millions of shared public quote experiences, end quote, just don't call them games, under a single standard. A lucky few Roblox creators even make a full-time living creating those spaces, which include unofficial Squid Game recreations that skirt IP laws deftly, end quote. I find that very interesting. In this episode of Unusual Due Diligence, we covered 7 key building blocks of the metaverse. We even surfaced an unexpected link from the metaverse back into basketball, almost as an aside. Even more, we learned how this channel has grown to 300 members strong as of this video, and how the channel itself is looking to find a place in the metaverse to call a second home. The future is inherently unknowable, but I do know this. This is Unusual Due Diligence. I am your host, Poseidon, god of the sea. Make waves, my friends.